And here we are with Broadcast Team Alpha. Today we have with us a retired FBI investigator, one we lovingly call the X-Man. And he is spilling the beans on what we all want to know.
Oh my goodness, and this is such an exciting show. John Desouza was an FBI special agent working with counterterrorism and violent crimes for 25 years. He's also an attorney and maintained a top secret security clearance during his time with the US government. Also lovingly known as the X-Man, he collected true life X-Files that he shares now in his books, The Para-Investigators and the Extra-Dimensionals. John Desouza suggests that most of the assumptions we have had in ufology for the last 60 years have been wrong. In his presentation about the unthinkable in ufology, there are a few revelations. John Desouza reveals that there are 3 authentic UFO cases on video that he personally knows are non-terrestrial genuine cases, not including the Roswell crash. Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash was a cover-up, and extra-dimensionals and the elite powers in control had a little something to do with that. And there's a smoking gun document that's quite interesting. Disclosure isn't a real hope, it's a red herring meant to lead us into a black wall. Revelation will be different. It's directed to us from alien visitors on a massive scale, and that's what will be real. And I give you now the real life X-Man, John Desouza. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Nori. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aage. It's great being here with you guys on this wonderful show and here to talk about these important topics that matter so much.
So exciting. So I'm reading your book, The Extra Dimensionals, and I love, one, how you transition from ET to ED. Initially, like the nurse in me is like, oh, emergency department. Then I was like, no, extra dimensionals. But I love the way you transitioned that. But let's just go back to the beginning, because there's a little bit about you in the beginning of your book. And who are you? Tell us a little bit about John Desouza.
Well, I was an FBI agent for 25 years. I've been a field investigator for the FBI for that long, and so when I left the FBI, I looked around to see what is the area that is more in need of investigative skills of the type that can penetrate deception and falsity that is everywhere. And to me, the paranormal and ufology and these areas of the supernatural just look to me like they have more deception and misleading factors in them than just about anything else that I could think of. And so that's one of the elements that led me to study in this area and to investigate in this area. So that's what I'm about, and that's what I like to do.
And you know, before I read your book, that was very impressive to me, but it didn't make as much sense to me as it does now after reading your book, when you talk about the investigative process and you talk about evidence and, I don't know, real evidence, and then the authenticity of the experience and how, I know I'm not saying the right words, but
no, you are.
When you laid out the way that you really investigate things and the way that people investigate things and how the MOs, lead to the truth, I love that you are investigating this. It's so incredibly credible and amazing.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That's what I've been saying, that there's 13 on a dozen of people like me out there, but there's very few like you that have the credentials and the background and have access to all the evidence that we sometimes don't. That's why you're so special here.
Oh, thank you so much, Aage. Yeah, one of the things that I noticed very early on, even in my FBI career, is that one of the controlling factors in the paranormal, in consciousness studies, in ufology, one of actually the greatest controlling factor is this presence of the scientific overlords who are here determining where science is not just a methodology, which is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a methodology, but where they are the overlords of what is real and what is not. And that's why one of the things that they always say is follow the data. Follow the data. That's what scientists always say, and scientific thinkers. The problem is what they really mean is follow the material data to a material conclusion and no further. And that's what happens on a regular basis. That's why ufology hasn't moved hardly at all in the last 60 years since Roswell. It's being contained. It's being very carefully controlled by these scientific factors. And the reason is because investigators cannot just follow the data. Investigators have to follow the clues, no matter where the clues lead. And the places those clues lead can be non-material, supernatural, and paranormal. And that's what a real investigator does. They follow those clues no matter what realm they end up in. And that's what I do. That's why what I do is so different from what the normal materialist scientists do in this area. And that's what we need to work against.
And that investigation should lead to data, but sometimes data is omitted or changed. And that leads me to another thought. You know, you have done some real investigations into those so-called mummies that really aren't mummies. They're just corpses that is, encased in something. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because this has become so high profile in the UFO field, and it is the conclusions that the official story brings up is wrong. Could you please talk about this?
Yeah, sure. This is really the exposure of the greatest fraud that we have seen this century. The reason it's so great is not because of the fraud itself, but because it has exposed an entire class of the scientific mainstream and what they do in these cases, because there's many of these mummy cases. There's many of these. And apparently they all follow the same script. And that's what's being exposed, because through the main case, which is the Atacama 6-inch mummy, the Atacama from northern Chile, which is this little 6-inch mummy that has a very exotic, sort of alien looking appearance to it. And it appears to be a non-human species. No one was ever saying that it's an alien. No one was saying that at all, except, of course, the mainstream media that comes in and always creates the label, oh, this is an alien. This is an alien thing. You're saying this is an alien thing. And no one is saying that, of course, because we can't prove whether something is alien or not, because we don't have DNA samples from aliens to compare it to. So no one can say if something is alien or not. But what we can say is that we see 18 features on this thing. And I don't know if you can show the pictures while we're on, but there's 18 features on this thing that are clearly non-human. It has a cranial size that is, of course, much larger and different from a human cranial size. It has a different number of ribs. It has a different number of plates in the skull. It has many anomalies, and also it has if you show the X-rays of this thing, it has thick bones, and all the joints are fused, and the skull is fused, and it appears to have been 6 to 8 years old at the time of death. So what we can see right away, and what all the preliminary genetic testing known as mitochondrial testing, the preliminary genetic testing all showed that this thing is definitely non-human, and that it is also not a fetus, a human fetus despite its incredibly small size. It's not a fetus at all. And so that was all shown, and that was actually also agreed to by the Stanford Science Department, who did the examinations on this thing, because Dr. Greer brought this thing forward in 2012, and he also put it in the documentary Sirius, which is available. Anybody can see it for free, and it's documented on there that Stanford Science Department did all those preliminary testings on that thing, and the mitochondrial testing, and they showed that it was definitely not a fetus, not a human fetus with mutations, that it had no mutations also, because the mutation markers can be examined in the preliminary, and it's just not human, not a human species. That's what was shown in all of the preliminary testing. But then, of course, they put it in for the deep testing, which is also nuclear testing, also it's known as, and then where they do the individual DNA, and that takes years. And so the testing on the Atacama desert mummy finished, and they found it was a real creature. But then in March of this year, the Stanford head of the Stanford Science Department, Gary Nolan, he put out just a couple of page conclusion that said it's just human after all. It's just a human fetus. Forget about all the preliminary testing. Forget about all of the atomic testing, and don't look at the atomic testing, because another thing they do is they never post the results on the internet publicly, so that people can see the genetic testing, which would be a very easy thing to do. And that's been requested in every one of these cases, and it's not done. And the reason is because they don't want other scientists to see that the genetic testing, the deep genetic testing, does not line up with that little conclusion that they put forward, which is what we call in the law a whole cloth conclusion, something that they just came up with, and that has really no connection to the science that was done in this case. And that's what happened in this case. And then the thing is, if you're an investigator, you pull on this thread a little bit, which means you go look at other scientific examinations with the laboratories of these mummy cases, you find that the same exact script, motion for motion, word for word, has been followed in many, many of these other cases across the decades. And it's incredible. And it's not a coincidence. This is something that is managed, controlled, and that is intentional across, where mainstream science is working hand in hand with fake news that then takes that conclusion and then blasts it all over the earth, which is what they did in the Atacama case. As soon as Gary Nolan put out that fake conclusion, every single corporate news service took just the conclusion, didn't talk about the DNA testing. It carefully excluded and just talked about the conclusion, and then blared those headlines all over the earth. And it was under the headline of, well, you remember this alien-looking thing? Well, turns out it's just a human fetus after all. And it is incredible.
I'm a little new to ufology, but I am not uninitiated. And what you're saying about the fetus kind of insults my nursing background because of the bone density. The
Right.
Bone density indicated that thing bore weight.
Right.
Bore weight and was on the planet at least 6 to 8 years, right?
Right. And you don't have to be a trained radiologist to look at the x-rays, because there's so many of them, and anyone can Google image this and just put in Atacama 6-inch mummy, and they will see that these x-rays, the bones are dense, and all the joints are all fused, and the skull is fused, and Stanford Science Department is on record. I have the video of them saying in the preliminary testing that it's obvious that the bones are dense and thick. This thing was 6 to 8 years old at the time of death, which, by the way, wasn't too long ago. It was carbon dated like 60 years. So this thing was just 60 years ago, this thing turned into a mummy. So,
And it was preserved in diatomaceous earth. That's why it stayed intact.
well, it's one of the driest. It's one of the driest deserts on the earth, the Atacama, in northern Chile, and so that's what preserved it.
Yeah, it only rains about every 12, 15 years in that particular area.
Wow. So
Yeah,
this is probably like a very direct question, and I hope it's okay, but why, and I am a newbie with ufology, why the big cover-up, right? What are they trying to prevent? Why the big cover-up?
That's a perfect question, Nori. Perfect. Because that's the same question I asked myself. Because this is obviously a system of control that is working here. And I call that system of control the elite powers in control. Because I don't like to say the I word. I don't like to say certain words that will get me taken down. But they are the central banking dynasties that rule over the nations and tell the nations what to do every day. And these are elites that are giving these marching orders to these scientific authorities, to these laboratories. And why? Why? Do they really care about a bunch of dead bodies of little alien-looking things that are being found all over the earth? And finally, when I started looking, and again, this is an investigative thing, if you keep on investigating this, you start to find another curious phenomena, epiphenomena, if you will, from all these cases. And it is that there are, everywhere that this happens, and this happened in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, it also happened in Kyshtym, Russia, a remote area. It's always in a remote area of Russia, on the outskirts of Russia, which again is like desert, rocky terrain. And it happened, of course, in Nazca, Peru, where they are, again, in a remote area with a lot of caves and tunnels that are very large and largely unexplored, and where we're bringing out those Gaia TV mummies. That Gaia TV takes a lot of heat over those mummies because everybody's like, oh, those things are fake and so forth. And the real truth is something different. But what the other epiphenomena that occurs is that if you start looking into police reports and local journalist reports in those areas, what you start finding out is that those creatures, these diminutive sort of creatures, and sometimes they're 6 inches, 12 inches tall, or a little larger. And what you find out is these creatures, there are reports on the ground, anecdotal, admittedly, evidence that these creatures are alive right now in these areas. They live underground, supposedly, but they do appear above the ground sometimes when the moon is full or conditions are special. They do appear above the ground and are seen by locals, by natives in these areas. So what's the reason for this big cover-up? The reason is not to keep us from a bunch of dead mummies that could or could not mean something. It's to keep us from investigating further and seeing that these things are alive right now, and they are on the earth with us. That's what they're trying to, that's the goal, the real goal line that they're trying to keep us from getting over, is by keep us from looking further into that reality. And that's why they're trying to get us from going across the goal line of discovering a new species that doesn't fit into the current scientific paradigm. If you go out and find a cadaver of a missing link of some kind of creature that's like part ape, part human, oh, you'll be hoisted up on their shoulders and they'll have parades for you.
Yeah.
That'll be great because that fits in, and that is done sometimes. Or people find a skull that appears kind of ape-like because that fits into what the evolutionary model of science. And so you'd be celebrated for that. But if you find one of these alien-looking things, that's not such a big celebration. And that's the reason why they will not let us cross over that goal line of finding a new species that doesn't fit into the current scientific paradigm.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think also religion has a part in that?
Yeah, religion always has a part. Organized religion always has a
Yeah.
part in anything that stops progress, that stops people from, Galileo found that out
Yeah.
when he tried to discover the reality of the planets and astronomy and what was really going out in space. And the church decided that that was against, because the church and science at that time were one and the same. Were one and the same. And I'd like to suggest to you, Aage, that we are at that time again, because science has become an organized religion where the high priests are men in white lab coats who tell you what reality is and what it is not. They are the high priests, and the sacrament that they give you every Sunday, instead of being a little wafer, the sacrament is this stuff inside of test tubes that they give you, you give them, and then they tell you what that little sacrament means, and you have to accept the answer. And that's the problem that we're in right now, because again, mainstream science is hand in hand with fake news and mainstream authorities to prevent us from getting across the goal line of finding out what's really going on in our world today.
Yeah, it's been like that for a very long time. And then again, we have the other mummies that I know you talked about at our lecture in Tucson here about a week ago. That was very interesting. Can you say some more about those also?
Yeah, the Kyshtym. There was a Kyshtym mummy that I don't know. You can put in photos of it. It's Kyshtym mummy. It was very similar from Kyshtym, Russia. It was the Kyshtym, and of course, if you Google it. Google image it, the authority, what do you call fake news, immediately said, "Oh, it's the Kyshtym alien mummy." So even today, you find it that way. But that's not what was being said by anyone, that it was an alien. We're just saying this is a non-human species. And the Kyshtym mummy was a creature that was 1 foot tall, similar in appearance, much larger than the Atacama. But similar in appearance, except it had this weird shape, sort of ridged skull that had ridges in it and kind of like came up to a triangle point. That was very, very exotic, and many non-human features. Again, this came out in 1996. This was found. However, there is testimony, and there's even pictures that this creature, the Kyshtym creature, and those photos are available, people can see them, was actually alive just a few years before it was found. It was actually alive and just died somehow. And it was being kept by a local woman in Kyshtym as a pet. And there's actually pictures of her holding the creature. There's pictures of her holding the creature and playing with it, and so forth. So that's a weird sort of twist that kind of segues into my theory that these things are alive right now in these remote areas. But the Kyshtym was, again, it was the same script. It was examined. It was turned over to the Russian Scientific Federation laboratories. They did the science board, and they did the examinations. In the preliminary mitochondrial, they did the same thing. They said, "Oh, this looks non-human, of course. Here's a list of anomalies that it has: the shape of the head, the shape of the eye sockets, the number of ribs, these particular, again, the skull is completely fused, the joints are fused. It's not a fetus, obviously not a fetus, not a human fetus of any kind. Also, the mutation markers, which can be examined in preliminaries, the mutation markers are always in the same place on any humanoid creatures. And those can be examined very quickly. The thing had none of the markers for dwarfism, for anything that would create these mutations in a human type creature. So it's not a mutation. It's not a human mutation. It's not a fetus. All these things were found. Then they did the deep testing, of course, which takes years, and people forget about it. And then they came out with the conclusion later that read word for word the same thing the Atacama conclusion read. It said, "Oh, folks, despite all the features it had, It's just a human fetus with mutation. That's all it is. It's just a human fetus. No further explanation of why it looked the way it did or anything like that. Just it's a human fetus. That's it. And then that gets picked up by the news and blasted everywhere. And it's the exact same script. It's amazing.
It's obviously that government and industry works by the book. They have procedures and it can be very predictable. So we see the same thing happen here as it does other places. And now I see we're at the bottom of the hour here. So let's take a 3-minute break. And then we will be back here talking with John Desouza, the X-Man.
Speculation is, are they ETs? Maybe address that a little bit more when we come back.
I can, but the simple answer to that is that anyone who says we can make a determination on that is lying.
Are there any pointers that show anything in the archaeological records, like maybe in ancient or anything like that? Is there maybe some inscriptions or something like that that shows similar beings or creatures? Or is there any archaeological pointers like that?
John, when you did,
I would say absolutely, but that would require. But that's research, though.
That's pure speculative.
That's Van Doniken research.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, right. I'm sure that the answer is yes. I'm absolutely sure that the answer is yes. But that's just a question of researching those diagrams, those sculptures, those
Right.
Which
I
I'm sure
anything like that said, hey, these, interestingly enough, if you look over here, there's some similar creatures.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And I will develop that in the future because that's important to have those visuals because these creatures are ancient races. And one of the things I believe is that they may be more Earth residents than we are. So therefore there's got to be representations of these creatures all over the Earth, probably. Yeah.
What you also mentioned here in Tucson at the lecture was that the local people, they said that some of these, they have been seeing them for ages, and some of these were traveling in balls of light. Was that the Atacama?
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't. That didn't come from me.
Oh,
about the balls of light.
Oh, that was maybe the guy behind me that mentioned that. Yeah.
There is a lot of reporting that there is tremendous UFO activity also reported in these areas, in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, and also in the Kyshtym. Wherever these creatures are found, there's always a much larger level of UFO reporting. But I believe those UFOs could be coming from beneath the earth as well. Just like these creatures.
Oh, they perfectly well can. In fact, I know that they may be coming from the big cavern inside.
How does that compare to the interdimensionality? I mean, or would that be other EDs that would be interdimensional? I'm just thinking, do they really live in the earth? Because it makes them sound like a groundhog or something.
Yeah.
I see them so much more than
in a way, this is really a separate topic because these creatures are completely physical. That makes me believe that they are some sort of hybrid race. I personally believe they are hybrid races of some kind, which means they were composed, they were created, maybe created by alien visitors, but they are some sort of hybrid creatures that were put together because they're completely physical. They're leaving cadavers all over the place. Mm-hmm. So they are not extra dimensional in nature. Right? They are very different from alien visitors, but that's my own, based upon my investigations of how things happen when I investigate alien visitors, and when I investigate these creatures, it's completely different. These things are incredibly physical, and apparently only physical, But then again, whenever you're talking about underground chambers and underground areas, those underground areas maybe start out physical as tunnels and caves, but I believe they open up to 5D space in that sense. And then that's where the extra dimensional factor comes in again to open us up to something else that is not physical.
Wow. Okay, my mind is just bent a little bit. I have to come back.
Yeah. My opinion is that some of the interdimensionals, which probably most might be, they might, when they come from that other reality into this one, they take on a physical form. So they are physical while they're here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about that being possible. I also talk about, because as an attorney, you always give alternate explanations for different things. And I also talk about the possibility that every contact experience, abduction, every direct contact with alien visitors may actually represent the conversion of the target, the human target, into an extra dimensional nature, where they are temporarily transformed to a different plane. They don't know it, but they may actually be like Betty and Barney Hill when they encountered alien visitors. They may actually have been changed into a different nature, a different medium from physical for a short time, and that could actually help explain the command and control that the alien visitors have over the humans when these things happen, because it's in their environment. They bring their environment with them and absorb the human physicality into it temporarily, which could also explain why people have contact experiences like I did when I was little. They feel this change in the air where everything just kind of changes, not just temperature, but like it seems like everything, like reality changes when you're in contact with these creatures.
Yeah, and that would explain why that somebody laying in their bed, they see the little short alien come up to the foot of the bed, and then they are moved out through the wall.
Yeah.
That cannot happen here.
Unless you're converted somehow. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Or John, the Brazilian, right? The young Brazilian man who went on the ship and the blonde mated with him twice.
Villa Lobos, yeah.
He died so young. I thought that was
he?
I mean, he was like 60 when he died. It was really interesting to me.
Yeah, that is strange because, that is strange. But I mean, he had a long, full life. He was very highly regarded and very successful, and maintaining the truth of every word of his story until the day of his death, despite incredible resistance.
Yeah.
That's sad that he died that young, though.
Amazing. That was
that phrase you used, John, that someone asked you what one of your favorite phrases was that you mentioned was, "I know what I saw."
Okay, yeah, I know what I saw is very important as a phrase because we are being gaslighted. We are the forces of scientism and cynicism are interested only in tearing down things that sometimes they know are real, and sometimes because they are against belief and against the thought of people who believe differently from them. And
a person can't deny you can't deny someone's experience. I think that's wrong of anybody to try to deny someone's experience.
Exactly. So it's important for people to remember the phrase, "I know what I saw." And, I know what I experienced. I know what I went through. And you cannot convince me otherwise.
That phrase can encourage people that have had experiences to actually say, okay, yeah, I know what I saw. And maybe they can come out too, instead of hiding.
Exactly.
And just interestingly, I can't remember. There's a Facebook list. It's pretty big. The event is happening. And I kind of threw a teaser out there saying, if an ex-FBI agent told you there were alien visitors, would you believe it? I cannot believe how many people came forward and said that they've had experiences.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really amazing. And they're super interested.
Good.
Maybe with that thing, what's your favorite
I know what I saw.
phrase. Yeah, know what I saw.
And I think it's that whole condescension of the so-called, like you mentioned earlier, the MSM and all these thought leaders and all these thought people trying to tell people what they saw. And wait a minute, I didn't see that. No, you didn't see it. You didn't see anything. Hold that little pen up to your face.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Kind of like truth. I know nothing.
You
I
didn't
mean,
see anything.
with enough duress, people can succumb, right? And say, okay, fine, I didn't see anything. With enough pressure, you know.
Exactly.
That's why was it Betty and Barney and his wife that they brought him through hypnosis. But Betty, her experience was so disturbing or something, right, that she could not remember.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
interesting.
Because some truths are just experiential. You know, some truths, they're there, you went through it, and you can't allow the forces of scientism or any other organized religion back you off of what you believe and what you know to be true. That's very important. And so we need to always provide safe harbors for each other, for people to talk about these things, for people to share these things, and to know that the most important evidence is not something that goes in a test tube or that a man in a white lab coat shows you is correct or not. The most important evidence is connection, and this is for any court anywhere in the world, connection to human authenticity. Human authenticity. That is the most important evidence that there is, because that connects to human consciousness, and that's what tells us what is actually real. And so we need to always develop that for each other and help each other with that as well. Because, go ahead.
Yeah, even the human experience as it is explained can probably come as close to evidence as it can, because maybe somebody just have a story, but with a lie detector it can be pretty well proven that that story is real. Isn't that true?
Yes, but lie detectors don't really tell you if somebody's lying or not. Lie detectors are simply an instrument that measures body functions. It doesn't really fulfill that. But some people like lie detectors, like Travis Walton. He likes lie detectors because they always show that he's being honest, and his entire group were being honest. And that's the case in many of these famous cases that we heard of. There's stacks of lie detector evidence that it's not evidence, but lie detector data that shows that so many of these people who know what they saw, that they are being completely truthful as far as they can with these incidences, like Travis Walton, for instance. Yeah.
Then we have this huge movement right now. It's called disclosure. Give me your opinion on what you think. Is that anything that will ever happen, come down from the government or industry, or will it be maybe that the interdimensionals or whoever they are will make themselves know?
Yeah, I don't think disclosure, and I go into this in depth in my book, The Extra Dimensionals. Disclosure is just a red herring. It's like a code word for be quiet and keep begging the government to tell you something. That's what it really is. And the government doesn't have anything for us. It has mountains of data. There's lots of mountains of data. If you go to the Air Force right now and you're allowed access, or the FBI or the CIA, they have mountains of data on UFOs, on alien visitors, on all this stuff. But they don't have the inside agenda. No one in government has that inside agenda of the alien visitors, what they're doing, why they're doing it. That's not going to come from them. It never will. It never can. What's going to come eventually is revelation directly from alien visitors to us, because they have the technology to connect directly to us. They don't need to do what humans would do, which is go to the White House lawn, talk to the leaders, and go from there. They wouldn't need to do that because their technology is much more advanced. They can come directly to the people who are important to them. And we know that we are important to them because they keep contacting us. And those levels of contacts are only going up and up because we're reaching a level, we're reaching a time when something really big is going to move, something's going to give, and we are going to have this massive revelation that's going to occur. And it's going to occur soon, I believe.
Okay, so the light bulb just went on. So the fear is, right, from the powers that be, right, that are covering, that are putting the big blindfold over us. The fear would be that we make contact with this, this race that is more powerful than having to go lobby on the White House lawn.
Oh, yeah.
Then they could, in fact, be dismantled. Is that it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Yes, they don't want that contact, and that's exactly why we see this enormous buildup. And the factors for it are everywhere. For what's also going to be coming, which is fake alien invasion. See, that's a whole nother area of this that is going to occur as well, and that is being managed by the elite powers in control, who are building up factors for it. And one of the factors you see being built up for that is these people who are everywhere in the paranormal, trying to control the paranormal and herd us towards this unknown alien threat, UAT, unknown alien phenomena. They're trying to create these new acronyms for UFOs and alien visitors. And those acronyms are unknown alien phenomena and unknown alien threat. That's the big one. We actually recently heard Hillary Clinton and John Podesta use those phrases, unknown alien threat. And why is that? They're trying to herd us towards getting hinked up about aliens. And this is why, and Wernher von Braun said this was going to happen. He said, we're all going to be told about the threat from alien visitors, the big threat. So we're going to have to weaponize outer space, put all these weapons up in outer space to defend against the alien visitors. And we see a lot of other factors going forward for that right now too, where they are weaponizing outer space. They are setting up this armada in outer space. And eventually there is going to be some sort of created fake alien invasion that's going to occur. And that, who knows what's going to happen with that. But we have to be ready to distinguish. We have to be ready to know when it happens that it's something that is manufactured. So that's another whole nother area of this that is being developed right now that we have to look out for.
Wow. I mean, talk about keeping people off balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's how they seek to cut off that concern that they have with revelation, with the benevolent alien visitors are going to connect to each of us and light us up. And that's another reason. That's another reason why you have these organizations that are collecting all this information on experiencers, finding out who they are, where they are, what their identifiers are, and then forwarding that information to places that are affiliated with the elite powers in control, because they want to know that information. That's very important for them.
So that's a little scary for people that want to come forward. The question would be, okay, who can I really talk to?
Yes, be careful who you come forward to. Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anybody that you can go forward to, or do you know what I mean? I mean, is there any kind of safe coalition that you can really talk about your experience with, or?
Well, I'm starting X-Man Institute, which is going to be a foundation that is going to be in the business of investigative and consciousness studies, and that will be a place where we will be helping people with their paranormal and ufology experiences, and that will be something that will be in the coming months that I will be putting together, and that will be very exciting and interesting, because right now you've got massive, well, I'm thinking one particular organization that has out there that is that has already, I believe they've openly admitted that they are collecting people's identifiers and handing them over and selling their to their stuff to one organization in particular called To the Stars Academy, and just handing them over all the biodata on experiencers and selling it to them. And that is outrageous. That is outrageous, because that information is very important to the elite powers in control, who want to identify all the experiences, where they are, what they're doing, and where they're easy to find, because that's going to become very important when there is a sort of revelation that occurs, and these people will be lit up with some kind of special abilities and other things, and that's why it's so important to identify who they are.
See, John, you would just mention something about To the Stars as a somebody who's been on that side of the fence, on the government side. As you know, To the Stars has 3 retired government people that have had.
Are they retired though?
Exactly. Well, that's the question I was going to ask you.
Are they?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
What, did they retire? What was it, like the day before
they got hired by the
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
How long does it take to organize a job like that? Wouldn't it take like a year to like organize that? Well, and yet they had like one day.
Yeah,
had
all of a sudden they just popped in. Yeah,
there's like that, huh?
Yeah.
And their organizations had nothing to do with it. Right?
Well, I think also too, in the community, you're hearing people have already, there's a huge amount of suspicion that while it seems altruistic in nature, that wait, you've got 3 guys that came right out of the deep side of this. So,
yeah. And the deep side they came out of, is that deep side known for sharing information with the public and helping the public and all that, and transparency? Yeah, I didn't think so. It's just, it's very, 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 I would say beyond suspicion. It's almost laughable. It's almost laughable that you're going to tell me that a few high officials from the CIA and the Pentagon and DIA and places like that are in the business of hiding everything from the public. They're in the business of a lot of things, but helping disclose information to the public is not one of them. Maybe they'll sell you some stock in their company, but I don't see them helping the public in any way at all. And but they do have a nice, authentic representative with Tom DeLonge. I mean, because to me, when I sit down and I listen to him, he's obviously authentic. He's obviously really believes in all this stuff, and I see his honesty as he's talking. But then he's talking about these guys who have been in the military-industrial complex, and who I believe still are, of course, as if they're insiders. They're insiders. They're so inside. They're inside of the inside. Right, it's insidery. Exactly. The insidiness is incredible on this. They're so inside. And I'm just thinking, what are they on the inside of, though?
And what are they bringing out?
Yeah, exactly. Right. What are they bringing out as they're selling stock in their company? As I see Christopher Mellon standing in front of a Mylar balloon on December 16th when they had the first conference, and it's a big Mylar balloon and he's saying this is evidence of UFO technology, because here it is. It's a Mylar balloon from a 1-year-old party that was just released into the sky, and it's proven to be that. So it's just
info. Yeah. What do they call it? Controlled opposition.
Yeah. Well, the elite powers in control, which are indirectly in control of ufology and paranormal, because by spreading money around, they spread money around. That's how they are indirectly. But now they decided they want direct control of ufology. That's also how I know, by the way, that something really big is going to happen soon, like revelation. And they know that. And that's why they've shaken off all pretense. And they are sending forward groups like this to take direct control. No longer satisfied with indirect control, or by spreading payments through their CIA subcontractors. They want direct control again for the first time, I would say, of ufology. And they're doing it. and they've got mainstream media working hand in hand with To the Stars Academy, and they're holding hands, and mainstream media is working with them to put forward their version of unknown alien threat and all these other, goodies and shiny objects for people to go, oh wow, look at this shiny object, this is great. And it's working to an extent. It's working to an extent.
The impression I've gotten is that it seems like the past several decades of ufology has been concentrating on the mechanics and not the message that the visitors have been trying to bring. You feel that's the case too, that we've kind of gotten off, worried about how the stuff works instead of what they've been trying to tell us?
Well, because that's one of the ways in which the engineers and the scientists dominate in these areas. They get us distracted with things that they know about, or areas of expertise, like the mechanics of how things would work, and that stuff isn't important. I mean,
it seems like the message has come down even from the Barney and Betty Hill, as Nori mentioned earlier, all the way through.
Yeah.
Every person that's had a positive contact, or even some of it have negative, they've still gotten this message about the planet and how we need to change direction. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit about that.
Yes, exactly. And everyone always gets messages and things that matter to them. And that is the more important thing, because all of this stuff, there's so much distraction that is meant to contain this area, to contain us and contain us thinking. And that's why the biggest thing to be careful of is the scientific mainstream religion. Because just look at a few days ago, NASA made an announcement. Actually, it was European Space Agency made that announcement that they found an underground lake in Mars.
Yes.
And it's a massive underground lake that's 6 kilometers across, or maybe it's 12 kilometers across. It's like a little underground ocean, sort of. And everyone's so excited. The organization, and then NASA, of course, picks up the European Space Agency, and then that gets blasted out to all the fake news outlets, and they throw that all over the earth for everyone to get super excited. Well, if you look at this not in scientific thought, but as an investigator, and ask a few questions, like investigative questions, like, when did they know this, and how did they decide to tell us? Well, if you ask that question, you find out that the European Space Agency rover that was on, and the radar system that they used happened back in 2012, and the data that they collected that they're talking about was from 2013 to 2015. The European Mars rover and the radar system that they used and they collect that data from 2013 to 2015. And the examination supposedly was complete in 2015. But of course, they didn't have to wait for the examination to be complete over 2 years. They could have talked about this before that. But it's 2018 right now. So why did they not make this announcement in 2015 when they had already finished all of the examination of the data, because the big deal was they had to make sure it wasn't just ice, that it wasn't just hydrogen in a solid form of some sort, that it was actually flowing water, which is what they've come up with. But they could have done this in 2015. Why is the announcement being made now? What's the reason? Well,
there's no accidents there. There's plan.
Yeah, exactly. The answer is it's a political announcement, not a scientific announcement. Because if it had been a scientific announcement, they could have done it. They would have done it the moment that they finished the exam in 2015. So why is it a political announcement? I believe it has to do with Trump, President Trump, announcing his Space Force, announcing that, and he also, of course, announced that we are going to Mars with a manned mission. And all of these things, I think that the secret space program has decided that, they're coming for us. They're coming for us. and we better start letting out what's really going on Mars, because they're going to find out soon anyway. So I expect in, maybe in a month or two, they're going to announce the discovery of the forest, the green forest that some of us have seen already, because they take the one of NASA. We know from whistleblowers that there are people who are fully employed at NASA all the time, going through the grids of Mars and erasing things so that we can't see them. But it's an entire planet. They can't get every grid. And so there has been observation of some green forests on Mars. Wow. that we have seen. You can Google that and you'll find that
we got pictures of that. We'll show that.
Yeah, that there have been green forests on Mars. So now what's going to happen? What's going to happen now? Well, probably next month, ESA or NASA are going to announce that, there's some sort of forest on Mars, and then after that, something else that points to life being sustainable on Mars or something else. And they're going to keep doing that because they're concerned that Trump and other nations are coming for the secret space program to see what's really going on up there. And I believe there's a lot going on up there that we don't know about.
In the meantime, everybody needs to read all your books.
Yes, my books are available on Amazon, the Clear Hearers, the Extra Dimensionals in particular, even the Para Investigators, where I do a lot of explanation about evidence and proof, and I give examples of many cases in law enforcement that had to do with the paranormal and the real X-Files.
There we are.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, hold them up again, Aage. Where are they? There we go. That's it.
When are the X-Men, right, the true X-Files coming out?
I don't know. We're working on it.
Oh, good.
We're working on it. I'm always working with television companies, production companies, and so we're always in the midst of that sort of thing. But as for a deadline, it's always touch and go with deadlines and that sort of thing. And also my website is John Tama Books. Sorry for the clicking. John Tama Books. And I have a conference coming up in Irvine, California, coming up October 5th, 6th, and 7th. And it will be really something that is coming up. That's going to be a big conference with some really important people with some breaking news in these areas that we've been talking about. And I'm going to have Jordan Sather will be there, Teresa Yanaros, Grant Cameron, and many, many others. That should be really, really something.
Beautiful. And thank you. Thank you for what you do, and thank the Creator that you are so protected so that you can just go on and continue this work and continue with your foundation. And maybe we'll get to see you in October. That would be fabulous.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you so much, John Desouza. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thanks, Aage. Thanks, Nori. Thanks so much, guys. Awesome.